Hello, welcome. If I could ask people to take their seats, we'll start the occasion. Right, under the adage that a picture is worth 1,000 words, I'm just going to have this as the backdrop as we're talking, so folks can look at our basins, look at the tribal nations, look at the infrastructure network, look at the possibility of Pacific Coast LNG exports, circumventing the Panama Canal and exporting directly to our friends and allies in Asia. Good morning, my name is Andrew Browning, and I am president of the Western States and Tribal Nations Natural Gas Initiative. We thank you all for joining us in Washington, D.C. today, where the cherry blossoms are blooming around the tidal basins. Those trees are a gift of the people of Japan to the people of the United States, given in 1912, and their annual blooming symbolizes our nation's long-standing friendship and alliance. Today, we're here to examine the ways we can support each other as nations in terms of energy security, which is one of Japan's priorities as president of the Group of 7 nations this year. Weston is honored to host Japan's Vice Minister for the Ministry of Economy, Trade, and Industry, the Honorable Hirai Hirohide. Thank you. We are equally honored to have the Honorable Senator John Barrasso of Wyoming and the Honorable Senator Ben Ray Lujan of New Mexico sponsor and speak at this event. In keeping with Weston's transnational structure, we are also honored by the presence of Chairman Melvin Baker of the sovereign tribal nation of the Southern Ute Indian Tribe. The Jicarilla Apache Nation has also brought a contingent, including President Velarde and council members. And I would like to recognize the Ouray and Uinta tribe, one of the first Weston members, and I thank them for their presence as well. For those of you new to our organization, Weston is a transnational, bipartisan, and government-led effort to lower emissions, global emissions, by exporting natural gas from the American West to Asia. We believe that unlocking the Pacific Coast as an export route to Asia is the fastest, most competitive way to export our emissions reduction success. If we ship natural gas produced under the strictest environmental standards. Weston is a 501c4 organization governed by a memorandum of understanding that only governments can sign, and which grants them the right to appoint members to our governing board of directors. That means Weston is solely controlled by U.S., tribal, Mexican, and soon Canadian governments at the state, provincial, or national level. Our members are the Ute Indian Tribe, the state of Utah, the state of Wyoming, the state of Baja California, Mexico, the state of New Mexico, the western Colorado counties of Garfield, Mesa, Moffett, and Rio Blanco, the Southern Ute Indian Tribe, and the Jicarilla Apache Nation. Our unique multilateral structure brings the imprimatur of government leadership, invaluable local knowledge, and private sector expertise together and aligns them towards the future. Regional government authorities support Weston by connecting their local knowledge and economic aspirations to global geopolitical and environmental goals. Private sector companies support Weston's efforts by sharing expertise and market intelligence that enables concrete, actionable discussions with policymakers about the art of the possible. The vision for what became Weston grew out of the grand American tradition of bipartisan collaboration to solve big challenges, which is on display here today with our co-sponsorship. Former Governor John Hickenlooper, Colorado Governor John Hickenlooper, a Democrat, now Senator Hickenlooper, and former Governor Gary Herbert of Utah, a Republican, established a policy initiative to explore how to get their state's natural gas, which often lacked good market access, to Asia. We are proud stewards of that vision, predicated on the simple ideas of generating rural economic development, advancing tribal self-determination, which is a goal made easier with economic power, and lowering global emissions. We are, to my knowledge, unique in our structure and form of leadership. We are government-led from the start. What does Weston do? We encourage, support, and advocate for a robust and sustainable North American natural gas industry that exports gas produced under stringent environmental standards. To support our mission, we have spent significant time and resources making the case and setting the technical baseline as to why Rockies natural gas is better, why Asian countries should work with us to fuel their economies with a secure, long-term supply of cleaner natural gas. In the Rockies, some of our member companies are in a race to produce natural gas with the lowest methane intensity in the world, as much a commercial competitive advantage as an environmental advantage. And we are talking about a time horizon of decades, which is the kind of time our ongoing energy evolution is going to take. Weston's peer-reviewed study, a 2021 life cycle greenhouse gas emissions study, demonstrated amply the kind of environmental improvement LNG exports from the Rockies to Asia could produce. LNG exported from the Pacific coast to China, India, Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan would create net life cycle emissions reductions of between 42 and 55% if used to replace coal-fired power generation. That study examined the Rockies basins Weston represents, the Uinta, Piceance, San Juan, and Green River basins. Put another way, the study took the emissions trip from the gas well to the end user of electricity generated by natural gas in those 5 nations. It demonstrated clearly measurable benefits. These are the building blocks on which national commitments to emissions reductions could be made. Why have we always looked toward Asia? Beyond the natural geographic advantage the Pacific coast offers us, Asia has been forecast to be the source of 70% of global LNG demand through 2040. It also offers the greatest potential to immediately lower emissions if we can provide a steady, secure, and cost-competitive supply of natural gas to Asian nations with growing economies. The United States lowered its emissions year after year by the largest absolute margin in the world by using natural gas in place of higher emitting fuels. We want to export that successful recipe, which provides immediate emissions reductions as we develop and deploy newer technologies and forms of energy. That is the low-hanging fruit that Weston's members and supporters can help deliver on a timeline faster than most. And here's why. The Rocky Mountain region holds nearly 70% of the U.S. total of potentially recoverable resources according to the Potential Gas Committee. U.S. tribal nations hold almost 10% of the known oil and gas reserves in the U.S. Rocky states are already leaders in innovations that lower natural gas methane intensity to certified global low-carbon standards, including those under the aegis of the United Nations. Western states have extensive and underused natural gas pipeline and processing capacity, which can grant unrestricted access to the Pacific coast and can be future-proof to put us in position to participate in emerging hydrogen and decarbonized ammonia economies. And I could go on, but this was all true before the war in Ukraine upended the global energy markets overnight, and it is still true now. But those assets can now serve the new imperative thrust in Weston's mission, helping our allies strengthen their energy security. The aftershocks of Ukraine have thrown into sharp relief the overarching importance of energy security to all nations and their economic and national security. That critical attribute of energy has been forgotten or given short shrift in the global conversations about energy and the environment, which are too often framed as competing rather than complementary priorities. The new surge of demand from Europe, 60% more than last year, has made Asia's need for reliable supply more urgent than ever. The Rockies are perfectly positioned to be that source of reliable supply, and today's forum will explore the options to make exports a reality, as well as the major efforts being undertaken to ensure LNG can reach European markets. The major efforts being undertaken to ensure LNG can reach European markets have been making headlines and invoked rightful comparisons to the Berlin airlift. For Weston, they demonstrate the art of the possible when governments and companies commit to success and collaboration. In the museum in the back of the Visitor Center, which I suggest you all visit today, you'll see a map of the Eisenhower interstate system. That visionary infrastructure investment transformed our nation's economy and communities and national security for better. So I'd also like to highlight, and I'm running out a little bit of time here and we want to keep on schedule, there was a recent letter sent to the U.S. Ambassador to Japan, Rahm Emanuel, from 8 U.S. senators, including Senator Barrasso, sponsor of this forum. In this letter, recognized Japan has not only a vital mutual security treaty ally, but also the United States' fourth largest trading partner and most significant source of foreign investment. Japan is also a critical U.S. partner for enhancing energy security in the Asian Pacific region, an area where U.S. energy exports can play a notable role and can provide a number of strategic geopolitical benefits for U.S.-Japan relations. As president of the G7 this year, Japan has identified energy security as a key policy priority. Weston urges the Biden administration to further this initiative with Japan, given their leadership in this space, and offer recommendations to advance energy security for the U.S., Japan, other G7 members, and their allies. We are here to tell our friends from Japan, and eventually our friends and allies from other LNG importing nations, that the governments that make up the Western states and tribal nations are here to work with them to solve their energy security issues and do what friends and allies do, to help each other. In short, we have a stimulating, exciting forum for you today, and we believe we'll find some of the solutions to the energy challenges we face in the Western states and tribal nations, Japan, and beyond. Without further ado, let me please introduce Senator John Barrasso from the state of Wyoming.
Well, thanks, Andrew. I have a beautiful 5-page memo and a 9-page speech to deliver. So I'll deliver it right there. Wonderful to be with you. Thanks so much for all that you continue to do. I'm from the state of Wyoming, one of the western states. Thanks to the tribal nations for your leadership as well. Thanks to our friends from Japan to be here and join us all. We have members from the Riverton, Wyoming, Fremont County. We have the chairman of our Wyoming Energy Association here, Paul Ulrich, who's in military intelligence, works with my delegation, works for our governor. We are really focused on energy in Wyoming. And we think about economic development, energy driven. I think that's important for the map that you showed. As you said, Andrew, one picture tells 1,000 words. That is the story of what we're trying to do. I'm the ranking member of the Energy Committee. Joe Manchin is the chairman. And when we take back the Senate, I'll be the chairman of the Energy Committee. When I think of energy, I think of the 3 E's: energy security, economic strength, environmental stewardship. That's what Andrew was talking about. All 3 of them, key components of this. And Senator Lujan, who has just joined us from New Mexico, we are wonderful partners working together. As you said, this organization started by Governor of Utah and the Governor of Colorado, one Republican, one Democrat. Senator Hickenlooper is former Governor of Colorado, is now the Senator from Colorado. And if ever you want to lobby Western senators, I would recommend the Thursday afternoon flight that leaves from National Airport and goes to Denver. And Ben, are you going to be on the flight this afternoon?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. So 8 of us are on the flight. And there is bipartisan agreement that we want to all be on that plane that takes off, because it's the way that we can get home Thursday nights. So often Senator Heinrich and Senator Lujan are on from New Mexico, Senator Bennett and Senator Hickenlooper from Colorado, Senator Lummis and I from Wyoming, and then often Senator Tester and Daines from Montana. We land in Denver, check our watches, we run and make connections, and then we meet up again 9 o'clock Monday morning. We all fly in, and we're on the plane back. So you have 2 opportunities every week to visit with at least 8 of the senators in the Rocky Mountains. And you only have to buy 1 plane ticket. And get a coach ticket. Don't waste your money on first class. We're back there in coach like. But we work together in a bipartisan way for things that are best for the part of the world that we represent. And we know how important energy security is, and the economic strength, and the environmental stewardship, and I would say we do it better than any place else in the world. In terms of Japan, and I was in Japan in November, full understanding of the need for energy. I was there a couple of years ago, went to J-Power, looked at the new technology that was there to burn coal in the most fuel-efficient way at high temperatures. capturing carbon, all of the right ways to do the next generation fuel. Because Japan clearly understands we need all the energy. And as Andrew said, emissions are going down. They have been for the last 15 years in terms of what the U.S. is doing because of the environmental stewardship and the commitment of protecting our environment. So those are the focal points. The world clearly sees that Vladimir Putin uses energy as a weapon, and he's done it successfully. He's done it by funding the environmental movement in Europe so they wouldn't go out and explore for natural gas. Made them dependent upon him. They became so dependent that it's cost them now dearly. So they know how important it is. Just like Japan understands it, Europe understands, the world understands that Putin uses energy as a weapon. It's the master resource. They call it the master resource for a reason. It powers our economy, it powers our military, it powers the world. In terms of a currency for the future, I think it's not gold, it's energy. Whether it's oil, whether it's natural gas, it is the currency of the future that drives the world. Because everybody needs it. And we have an abundance, and we need to be able to sell them. And we have an administration here who's getting in the way. Blocking our pipelines, blocking the infrastructure, blocking the sorts of things that we need. We have a group of us who are committed to making sure that we can build the infrastructure. Get this done. Get this to markets who need it. It's good for the folks where it comes from. It gives you better, not just energy security, national security. If you're dependent on your enemies, if you have to buy fuel from your enemies, you're a lot more vulnerable. And I think here in the United States, we're much safer and smarter if we're actually selling energy to our friends than having to buy it from our enemies. I mean, that's it in a nutshell. If you were to write this as one article, we have a reporter, you write it as, I mean, that's it. And it just makes sense that we do it that way. And we want to make energy as clean as we can, as fast as we can, and do it in ways that don't raise costs for people. So when I think of energy, I think of energy that is available, affordable, and reliable. And that's natural gas. It's all, we need it all. We need the solar, we need the wind, we need the coal, the oil, the gas, we need the nuclear power, we need it all. Because the world demands for energy to continue to go up. Even though each appliance that we have is more energy efficient, the overall use of energy continues to grow from population growth, but just the world that we live in, an interconnected world. So that's the focus that I bring to the Energy Committee. It's the focus that the Republicans bring. It's the focus that Ben and I work on together at a time where some zealots on the other side don't care about affordability, availability, or reliability. Their goal is renewable. If it's not renewable, it's not good. Their thoughts. And that's the disagreement that we have philosophically. And I say that's a religion based on emotion, not based on the science of what the world needs in terms of. So I'm here to just tell you, to thank you for what you're doing. So we want to help in every way to make sure the infrastructure gets built. And I think that we're going to be able to be successful with an infrastructure bill this year. And the reason is because the Democrats have passed a bill that is truly like the Green New Deal. They can't get any of those projects done because the same regulations that have held up construction of the sort of energy projects that I've been promoting, the same laws, NEPA, is interfering with the ability to do wind turbines, solar panels, transmission lines, and all of those sorts of things. So if the Democrats want to work together with the Republicans, and I think we're going to see some of that on a bill to streamline some of the regulations to make it easier to produce the infrastructure that we need and the permits that we want to produce the energy, that I think we're now at a sweet spot of getting it done because of some of the legislation the Democrats have passed in a party line vote. Focus so much on green, the renewable, which they can't get built without the reforms that they need. So that's where we are today. And that's why I'm optimistic that we can actually get something done in a bipartisan way when it comes to the infrastructure to build all of the sort of projects, and specifically, Andrew, the sorts of things that we want to do. So, now to go to page 1 of the speech. Senator Lujan is here. he's in the majority, so the minority has to get out of the way for the majority. But we'll be on the plane together unless we both talk too long here today. Thanks so much for letting me join you, and Ben, it's a pleasure to share the stage with you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Well, good morning, everybody. That last part that Senator Barraza said, don't buy it. No one gets in his way. The seniority that he has, the respect that he has, he really is a great friend and an incredible leader as well. Thank you so much for the kind introduction, my friend, and I'll see you this afternoon, but I know I'll see you before then as well. To each and every one of our friends who are here today, I want to say welcome. And I want to begin by recognizing a good friend of all of ours from New Mexico. And if you don't know him yet, I hope you take the time to get to know him. And that's none other than Jason Sandell, who's in the back of the room there. So let's give Jason a round of applause as well, please. Jason was kind enough to reach out to me as well to see how we could be supportive. So one of the benefits we have in the majority, although we probably checked with Senator Barraza before we were able to secure this room, is to be able to secure real estate for gatherings like this as well. So as a new member of the United States Senate, Jason, I'm glad that I could play a role. So thanks for reaching out to me. I want to welcome our Vice Minister of International Affairs as well, the Honorable Hirohide Hirai. It's an honor to be with you today, sir. And I think that speaks volumes to the importance of this conversation, that you're here, that you and your team are here as well, with leaders across the United States, tribal leaders that have gathered, and not just for a conversation today, but that work with one another, lean on one another, share expertise, and find ways to find solutions. President Velarde from New Mexico is a tremendous leader from the Hickory Apache Nation, and someone that my father respected so very much while he was alive, and someone that I respect with his team that's here today. So it's an honor to have you today, sir, and thank you for being here. Look, it may not surprise many of you that I may have a different approach to getting to the same solutions as my colleague who just spoke. And I found that in most areas here in the United States Senate, I was a House member before, but now serving the U.S. Senate, is oftentimes we share the same goals. There may be a different approach to be able to get to some of these areas as well. But I hope what you'll focus on there is that we all want to achieve the same goals. Given the turmoil that everyone has faced around the world, that many of you have faced right here at home over the last few years with COVID, all that's happening around the world now, especially with Ukraine, it's changed so very much. The questions and concerns that we have with volatility, with areas with from grain shortage and food shortage to important conversation taking place from an energy perspective, are all absolutely needed because of this turmoil, but offering more and more solutions. I believe from a natural gas perspective as well, and I appreciate what I've learned from Jason, and having been a former public utility commissioner, here in the United States, as many of you know, state by state, there's bodies that oversee energy in different realms, whether it's electricity from investor-owned utilities, or in Texas, where they have a railroad commission that has jurisdiction over the entirety of most of this area, with the exception of their investor-owned utilities, where they have their own commission as well. But in the end, as you're looking for those solutions together, we look for transition. So as the senator shared, with concerns that we both have with permitting, namely focus right now on the bipartisan Infrastructure Jobs Act that was passed over the last year, which was critical recognition of the level of investment that's needed for roads, bridges, water, wastewater, broadband connectivity across America. If permitting challenges are not identified soon, I'm fearful that most of those projects will not be built. In the previous Congress, a senator from West Virginia, Joe Manchin, who some of you may know, offered a permitting bill. Unfortunately, it was blocked. I believe there's a lot of solution there. I was supportive of the approach that was being taken by Senator Manchin. One of the committees that I sit on now is the Senate Committee on Indian Affairs. And one of the areas that I brought attention to is to a local issue where there was a natural disaster declaration in this particular area. And there was a declaration by the President of the United States in Manuelito, New Mexico, which is on the Navajo Nation. And the federal government recognized the importance of an investment. FEMA put the money forward. Oddly enough, the Bureau of Indian Affairs did not approve an easement to do this work for a bridge and for a road. Children were forced to drive hours around this particular area just to get to school. Emergency response teams could not get to those communities in 15 minutes. It took them an hour and 15 minutes. You can imagine the devastation that resulted. The money was lost. We were able to capture the money again, but it took 12 plus years to fix a bridge and a road that should have taken a year or less. And I think that's just one example from an infrastructure perspective, whether we're talking about energy, the roads that you depend on as well in each and every one of these areas, water, and communities across the United States, and then finally catching up as a country when it comes to broadband penetration, all of which matter to the work that you're doing as well as we're talking about energy solutions, not just in the United States, but around the world. Investment must be made in infrastructure in its entirety. And we in the Senate and in the United States House of Representatives with the President have an immense responsibility to solve this infrastructure dilemma soon. And I hope I can learn from many of you on how we can bring more solutions to the table in that specific area. I've been saying since I was on the Utility Commission of New Mexico, where we had oversight over the investor-owned utilities, electric power here in the United States, but especially and mainly in New Mexico, that as we are moving toward transitions, I believed at the time with support of a combined cycle initiative for electricity generation, powered by natural gas. The natural gas was an important tool as well, even during that time. And I'm not as young as I was then. And my hair has grayed a little bit, a lot of it, since my time in that space. But over the last 2.5 decades, as there's more and more conversation and support, and many of you have already built more concentrated solar arrays or distribution generation from that perspective, but there must be transition until which time battery storage is completely solved in the United States. And that's just from an electricity generation perspective or from a home heating or utilization perspective. I'm a customer of a gas company where I live in New Mexico. I have a gas stove, a gas furnace, and understand that right now my needs may not be able to be met if the sun's not shining or the wind's not blowing. And as we look at transition fuels, this is an area where I've been putting more and more of my effort in working with colleagues like Mr. Barrasso as well. But you come together at a time that there needs to be world solutions. That's the incredible responsibility that you bear and that you're embracing and coming together to find ways to work closely. And as we hear from leadership from our brothers and sisters in Japan, and I say that because I approach all of this as a family. I think if we approach challenges as a family, we often get through them. And what I mean by that is, we start a conversation as family, and you say, we're friends. We're going to talk, and we might have some disagreements in between this conversation. But when we finish, we're going to be family and friends again. And I think if we take on more issues like that, especially here in the United States Senate, you'll have more civility and more harmony. And that must be front and center when we're looking at international agreements, looking at what challenges exist for you right here at home as well in order to engage in more of these agreements across the country. One of the areas that I hope I can work on with you as well, I worked on this with Senator Barrasso's team, but with a colleague of mine from Idaho. Many of you know that there's a lot of abandoned and orphaned wells in America. In Native American communities, where the support's not been there to plug those wells as well. Many families who have inherited land or inherited wells that were not producing, but they did not have the financial means to go and plug those wells. There was a recognition in the bipartisan infrastructure bill to provide investment to be able to cover most of these. Data has come back to show that there are many more. But this is an area where we can work to show that when we are working in these areas, and as my grandfather said, and President Velarde, you've taught me this, you leave things better than you found them. This investment will help to be able to catch up in areas where the financial means did not exist before to be able to do some of that work. The technological advances that you all have made as well as we talk about emissions. And this is important to me in New Mexico because, as you know, we have some of the largest emission clouds over New Mexico, although we're not the #1 producer. That tells me in other states more technology has been embraced. And there's been more and more effort to be able to bring stronger technology, more efficient and effective technology in all aspects of this. So that way we're able to leave things better than we found them. And I'm hopeful that I can learn from all of you in that space as well, and that we can find more solutions to embrace what you have done in many states across America. And we can help bring that home as well. So that'd be a personal ask of each and every one of you. I want to wish each and every one of you success with the work you're doing today and the relationships that you have fostered that you did not have before you arrived. I encourage you to make a few more. Because in the end, leaning on one another, learning from one another, it will help find solutions. And there may be some in the room as well that may have a different approach than something that you've identified. Hear them out. Find ways to come together and find those solutions. And I think as long as we continue down that road, with the examples that many of you have shared with me and my responsibilities, we can not just tackle this issue, we can tackle so many more. So thank you, Jason, for inviting me to speak today as well. And especially showing that while there may be different approaches, a senator like Chairman Barrasso, he's still a chairman, he's in the minority, but everyone calls him chairman still because of respect to him. That even two individuals from Western states that may have a little bit different of approach, we can work together. And I appreciate what he has done in opening his door to allow me to come in, especially as a new member. And then I'll settle on this, Jason. There's several of you that I know personally, and I want to say thank you to you for the prayers you offered for me to lift me up. Some of you may not know I survived a stroke a year ago. I'm doing very well. The medical journals do not suggest I should recover as quickly as I did. Faith, prayer, support of family, help me get where I am. But I share that with you to end on this note. Not necessarily directly related to why we're here today, but one I think that will be important for you in your lives. Learn the symptoms of a stroke. We're also busy. Not everyone makes time just to catch their breath. Spend a little more time with them. Or be attentive to you because you're so attentive to everybody else. You get a little dizzy, you see a little droop on your face, if you have a bad headache, if you have problems with vision, or you lose some balance, go get checked as if you broke a bone. Because with stroke survival, seconds may determine if we can be here or be elsewhere. So sorry to offer that at the end of this, but after I survived my stroke, I made a commitment to myself that anytime I had the honor and privilege to speak to others, I would share with them my experience in hopes that one more life could be saved. So everyone, thank you so very much. I wish you the very best. And thanks for having me today. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Senator. I'd like to now invite Mr. Harai Hirohide, the Vice Minister of International Affairs for the Japan Ministry of Economy, Trade, and Industry.
Good morning, senators and ladies and gentlemen. As was introduced, my name is Hirohide Hirai, Vice Minister for International Affairs, Minister of Economy, Trade and Industry, Government of Japan. So it is kind of very honored to be here in this very wonderful room to make some presentation over the very complex situation of energy and some solution for that the situation. The key is natural gas. So let me start with my presentation. So the theme I would like to talk about is tackling the energy trilemma. So that is a theme we would like to touch upon in this G7 Energy Minister meeting, which will take place third week of the April. And then the Japan will chair this important meeting. So I'm honored to have those kind of the important discussion and taking place in my country. So starting from those focus of the demand of the natural gas, I would like to draw your attention about the such focus or those scenarios. I would say there are two different types of those forecasts or scenarios. One is forecast approach, which is usual. You use those kind of graphs when you say about those market forecasts or those kind of stuff. Is based on the current situation and looking forward from now on. So that is the one thing. And another one, I'm sorry, let me look back. Another one, that in this graph, that the dot lines are showing you this backcast approach. That is based on starting from the future point. In this case, the 2050 is a target year, and by that year, maybe the world has to reduce the demand of natural gas almost zero. So starting from those dot and connected to the current level, that is a dot line. So we call it, that's the backcast approach. So there are two types of this. So let me simplify those graphs. And those are the three lines. One green line is a forecast scenario, which is being used by EIA of the United States administration. And another one, blue line, is the IEA STEP scenario, which is IEA, International Energy Agency, is using as a scenario based on those notion that all the countries already announcing so many measures to reduce the demand of the natural gas. So all in together, the IEA is forecasting of the demand in the future. And the last dotted blue one is the backcast approach, is taken in the IEA net zero emission scenario. And the scenario, you can see, by 2050 it has to be close to zero. So this big discrepancy you can see in those different lines. And then what that means in this net zero emission approach, of course, it is very, very difficult to achieve the net zero emission. And then because of those very small letters you cannot see, but just show you that's just one example. Wind and solar annual capacity addition. You can see that blue box. That is showing you one of the very important hurdle you have to overcome in the future. And one of this is how we have to make an effort to increase the number of the wind and solar power stations. It is saying that by 2030 we have to have the annual wind and solar power per 1,050 gigawatt every year. That is, maybe let me give you some example. Though, in order to have that gigawatt power, you have to have 300 baseball field size solar power every year. Every year. You see, 300 baseball field has to be filled up with all those shining solar panels. Every year. Every year you will be maybe more difficult to find a very suitable location. But every year, in order to overcome this very difficult milestone. And this is also, I have to say, this is one of the 30. And what happens if we cannot this? This is the future supply and demand of gas. And then once again, the blue one and black one is the focus approach of the each taken by the EIA and IEA. It is a very difficult difference, EIA and IEA, but almost the same line. And if you cannot achieve that, those reduction scenario, there is a huge gap there. And by 2050, and in the case of IEA, that gap will 4.64 trillion cubic meters. It is almost as big as the current production globally. And in the case of EIA, maybe the gap will widen. So that is the reality we have to face. And if we cannot, we cannot achieve the reducing of those natural gas, what would happen? That gap exists. Is there anybody who can meet the goal? Yes, there are. First butter will be your country, United States. But if US decides not to fill the gap, who will be? Russia. Russia will please to come into that to meet the gap and to maybe suck all those demands, and then money will go to Russia, and money will be spent what? Maybe the war with somebody. So that is one inconvenient truth or inconvenient maybe reality. And next one is in the case of LNG. Yes, once again, number one player should be the United States. But if you are not interested in, who will fill the gap? Iran. I stop here. And then, is it a really inconvenient truth or not? Maybe you will have to decide truth or not. But maybe when you decide that would be the truth or not, maybe you can consider what is happening now. Russia and Global South. Maybe you don't like to that such buying all those gases from Russia. And the G7 country decided not. Stop buying all those fossil fuel. But like India, Pakistan, all those Global South countries has beefing up the ties with Russia. And according to the Kotak Securities, India's imports of Russian crude in dollar terms of up to 12-fold year-on-year during the April-October period of 2022. That's a reality. And set aside of a Chinese one. But this is a reality we have to think of. Okay? Another maybe reality about the natural gas. Prime Minister Modi of India. Prime Minister of India has said that India's gas demand will grow over 500% in the foreseeable future, as the country has set a target to raise the share of gas in the country's energy mix to 15% by 2030. India's Prime Minister is saying this, whether or not the world would like to see that. Because facing such a undeniable growing, maybe a demand due to their growth of the economy, you have to feed them. That's the priority of India. Maybe the same thing can be seen in the remarks from the Singapore. Natural gas is the cleanest fossil fuel and will remain an important transition fuel for many countries, including Singapore. That is the remarks from the Singapore. So all those are very cold fact, whether or not you like it. So that's a reality we have to face. And another inconvenient truth is on the maybe you can see in the transition of the automotives. And everybody is expecting the current automotive fleet has to go to battery EVs. But you know the what drive the battery cars is the battery, of course, and the key component is lithium. But please have a look at those maybe lithium needed to make those battery cars. In 2040, the maybe required output of the lithium is like that, a blue line. But from the current level of production, maybe you can make the production maybe half the size of this, maybe as much as half the size of that the required products. And what happens? Maybe simple answer is soaring price of the lithium. And who will benefit from this? Please have a look at who is making that lithium. Maybe on the mining sector, lithium is, you can see the second one from the left. Blue one is coming from Australia. Good, our friend country. But on the process side, on the critical mineral processing, that one, the center of the three of the critical mineral processing, red bar is showing you how we are relying on the processing capacity from China. And China is the controlling power of the market. And if we demand too much on the battery EVs, then the money will go to China. And this is another maybe inconvenient truth we have to think of. And so if you saying so much of those maybe should scenario rather than is scenario, maybe we might make a very big mistake from the context of geopolitical economy. And all we need is to face the reality. That's the most important thing we think. Okay, so let me talk about a little bit about the current condition, the current situation of the Asia. Share of renewable power capacity and generation in ASEAN is the graph that you can see here. And you are not thinking that maybe you have an impression ASEAN country is somewhat reluctant to go for renewable. They are sticking to the old type of the fossil fuel burning of the energy. The reality is not. They are very active, increasing of the ratio of the renewables. And all countries have the ability to significantly expand their renewable power portfolios, and they will increase. Having said that, power generation mix in South and Southeast Asia still, you can see, of those, not the dense blue, not the blue and less thick blue, oil and gas, and coal, especially gray one, is the thing they are relying most. So that is the also reality. But maybe based on the reality, they are able to transform their maybe the portfolio more friendlier to the green economy. The key is ammonia. Because average age of the coal-fired power station plants in the 5 ASEAN countries is 8 years, very young, as young as he is. Totally different from our situation, your situation, and European situation. Their power plant age is like 30 or 40, close to, easy to decommission. But because their plants of the coal-fired power station is too young to go decommissioning, because they haven't not amortized yet. But based on that reality, how can you be more greener? But if you use the ammonia and coal-fired with the coal, then automatically you can reduce the emission of CO2. And also, rather just to transition to the renewable from the coal-fired power station, using the maybe the NH3, that is ammonia, then that is cost less than just a simple transition. And this is also good for all emission reduction. And this is showing you how emission reduction can be materialized by using ammonia. 40%, almost 40% reduction you can achieve. And ammonia, how can you make it? That is from natural gas. See, that's why we're saying they're very important for those energy transition, especially for ASEAN countries. And natural gas and LNG will not turn to stranded assets is the message in this paper. There are some critics who is saying that maybe investing on the LNG or natural gas is going to the stranded assets in the future, which means it's useless in the future because you cannot use the natural gas because of the environmental reasons. But wait a minute, all those infrastructure can be used as usage for the ammonia or hydrogen. And then maybe story is totally different. Even if you can invest on all natural gas related infrastructure, that can be used in the age of hydrogen, in the age of ammonia. And all those things can be possible from those innovation. Like some Japanese companies are making good efforts to develop gas turbines firing 100% of hydrogen, and also operate on 100% ammonia, maybe quite soon. And also we have to address some methane leakage when you produce the natural gas, and that is also critical we have to take care of. And in Japan, because we are very positive about using of those natural gas in the energy transition period, we are very making a serious effort for the methane reduction, especially in the production stage. And not only and also the methane emission measurement and CI calculation in ammonia plant is also being conducted by our research institute. So all in all I want to say is how natural gas is important for energy transition, and especially in our friends of Asian country is very hungry for that the important energy source. So in the G7 meetings coming next month, we would like to make an argument that you don't hesitate on investment on the upstream of the natural gas. And also, what would be the implication of the hesitation of the investment in the natural gas? That is the maybe thing you have to think twice about the implication of the economic, geo-economic implication. So those are maybe the short, brief presentation of this theme. That is a trilemma. Energy security and environment, economy, but maybe plus the such a geopolitical situation has to be added. And then very smart, a delicate way of handling we need. And then in that maybe thinking, natural gas is the fit for the answer. Thank you very much for this listening to. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Minister. I would like to now welcome the chairman of the Southern Ute Tribe, Chairman Baker.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. It's a good day to be here, and it's an honor to be here. You know, as we move forward, as everybody's come together, working together. You know, as we strive to get ahead in the future. So again, good morning. As we say in my native language, tuichquis, and welcome to welcome the Japanese delegation led by Vice Minister Heidi. Delegation from the Hickory Apache Nation, led by President Velarde, and honorable delegation from Ute Indian Tribe, Ed Sikakaku and Julius Murray. Welcome. I'm glad you're here. And all other attendees. A special thank you to Senator Barrasso and Senator Lujan for their support and willingness to participate in today's Capitol Hill briefing. My name is Melvin J. Baker. I am the elected chairman of the Southern Indian Tribal Council. Thank you, Western States and Tribal Nations Board, for coordinating today's events on behalf of the tribes affiliated with WSTN. I appreciate this opportunity to provide a tribal perspective on resource development and Western energy exports. First, I would like to provide a little context for those of you in the audience who are not aware of the important role that energy development has played for the Southern Indian Tribe and the other tribal nations who are members of the WSTN. The Southern Ute Indian Reservation consists of approximately 700,000 acres of land located in southwestern Colorado. Our sister tribe, the Ute tribe of the Uinta and Ouray Reservation, is located in the state of Utah, and its reservation is approximately 4.5 million acres in size. And our neighbor, the Hickory Apache Nation, has a reservation of approximately 1 million acres in northern New Mexico. On each of our reservations, the United States government owns much of the surface and oil and gas, minerals and coal estates in trust for tribes and tribal members. The tribes participate in WSTN are leaders in Indian country. We have exercised our sovereignty to oversee the prudent development of our energy resources for the benefit of our families and tribal communities. Each of our tribes has successfully established its own oil and gas development companies that produces, treats, and markets energy regionally and nationally. I am grateful that our three tribes are jointly participating in WSTN along with the states of Wyoming, Utah, and New Mexico. We have a common goal to provide future energy solutions and economic development for our rural communities in the western United States. It is so important with today's challenges related to energy, security, and climate change for tribal, state, and federal governments to work together to provide real solutions to the challenges that lie ahead. The first step in solving challenging problems is to promote open and honest discussion even when we have different views. This gathering today is a part of that process. In working together, the states and tribes participating in WSTN can be a catalyst to provide real-world energy transition solutions for the future generations of all of our constituents. Regardless of where headquartered, tribes throughout the country are unified in one overriding theme, that each tribe should be able to make the decisions that shape that tribe's destiny after taking into account the best interests of its people now and in the future. Indian self-determination has been a hallmark of federal Indian policy since the early 1970s, and many tribes have demonstrated that they are much more effective than federal agencies in advancing the best interests of their members. Meaningful review and revision of NEPA regulations to improve NEPA processes that have been in political tug of war. Critical infrastructure development and energy-related projects, including projects on Indian lands, have been held as hostages. Delays associated with NEPA review and project permitting stand in the way of repairing and replacing bridges and highways, upgrading of the energy grid, and projects that are critical to addressing climate change. As tribes, we support having an expanded role in evaluating the alternatives and environmental consequences of decisions affecting our tribal lands and reducing perpetual delay and expense of NEPA review, which is tied to federal regulatory approval of our decisions. The WSTN member tribes are interested in a NEPA process that would provide certainty to energy development decisions and related infrastructure projects. Finally, as energy demand is emerging, economies increase and developed economies implement energy policies to achieve net zero targets. Energy development responsibility by tribal nations from tribal lands can play a key role in meeting future global energy needs. Asia's energy demand for low carbon intensity natural gas is increasing, and natural gas from tribal nations and the Rockies can provide energy security and carbon emission reductions to the United States, allies such as Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan. Further, natural gas produced from tribal lands can foster new renewable energy deployment by balancing intermittency issues of renewable energy. Energy producers on tribal lands are moving forward toward more sustainable, low carbon intensity natural gas and are aligning tribes with major infrastructure developers to transform the energy economy. Low carbon intensity natural gas from the U.S. and tribal nations can be part of this solution to the global energy transition by supporting the markets associated with LNG. Clean hydrogen and clean ammonia for domestic use is an international export that will lower carbon emissions around the world. In closing, I would like to remind us all that there is a great opportunity for many tribes to play a role in the future clean energy economy if the government, tribes, industry, and academia unite around the common goal of affordable, reliable, and carbon neutral energy for future generations. Thank you for your time today, and thank you for the interest in the tribal perspectives on a resource development. So again, thank you very much on behalf of the Sunyu tribe, all the tribes, the Indian tribe, Hickory Apache Nation, our sister tribes. So thank you everyone for being here this morning, and Toea. Thank you.
One of the key issues, like one of what I'll call the three legs of the stool, in terms of our approach, is decarbonization. Stephen Davidson is the Vice President for Government Affairs for Tallgrass Energy. He'll talk to us about Tallgrass's extensive natural gas pipeline network and some of the key things that they're doing on reducing methane levels and helping to make U.S. natural gas, U.S. Western natural gas, some of the cleanest gas in the world. Stephen.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. As Andrew said, my name is Stephen Davidson, the Head of Government Affairs for Tallgrass. I'm particularly honored to be here today with the Vice Minister and your leadership, and also, would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge the Hickory Apache Nation, who 10 years ago welcomed me to the nation to participate in their Veterans Day event. So it's kind of surreal to kind of be back with the nation's leadership. So, I think the best thing to always start off any slide is with really small text. Our legal team, wants me to remind you to not buy or sell stocks based off what you're seeing here. And, what I would tell you is that if you're buying stocks based off of what public affairs people are telling you, you've probably got bigger problems. So, now that's done. So, we're Tallgrass Energy, right? We're based in Colorado. We are kind of at our core a Rocky Mountain company. We have close to 1,000 employees spread across 17 states along about 4 different business units. So our largest one is natural gas. We have pipelines that stretch from Ohio to Oregon. We've got, a crude oil business that goes from Wyoming and a pipeline down to Oklahoma. And then we're also one of the largest privately held water companies. So the way I like to think about it is we stretch from Ohio to Oregon and North Dakota to South Texas, right? Using a little bit of alliteration there. But the kind of fourth major business unit we have is really focused on decarbonization. And, a lot of us, participated in CERAWeek. A lot of us have seen a lot of the trends growing in the energy transition space. And I think it's important to really separate, press releases from action, right? And at Tallgrass, as a privately held company, we don't have to do a lot of press releases, and we have been making a lot of action. As it relates to our broader business, we have a number of projects that are public that we're actively deploying capital, spending time, investment, hiring staff, and developing. A couple of the ones I wanted to highlight. The first one is the Trailblazer conversion project, where we're taking a natural gas pipeline out of service, converting it to CO2. I'll talk more about that on the next slide and some of the challenges and opportunities associated with that broader decarbonization. And then two other projects, one of which is, we announced the largest sustainable aviation fuel deal in history with United Airlines and Green Plains. And so what you have in that joint venture, which we call Blue Blade, what you have in that joint venture is you have the demand for the product and United Airlines, wanting to utilize that sustainable aviation fuel at two hubs, one of which is the Denver hub, which is near and dear to our heart as a Rocky Mountain company, and the other is Chicago. And so what you see is United Airlines essentially working to replace the traditional fuel that they're using with this sustainable fuel, bringing down decarbonization on not only domestic travel but international travel. And then on the other side of that spectrum, you have Green Plains, which has historically produced a lot of ethanol for motor vehicle fuel. And as you're seeing kind of this trend of electric vehicles taking off with more federal and state subsidies and investments, you look at a long-term trend and you're seeing a decline in ethanol demand for motor vehicle fuel. And so what you're able to do is essentially utilize that ethanol that would otherwise be used for that fuel and essentially repurpose it to be used for sustainable aviation fuel. So what Tallgrass provides is kind of that intermediary position, right? I like to think of us, we are a midstream company, and that's exactly what we're doing in this case, connecting the supply of Green Plains with the demand of United. The other big project that we announced, and in fact we had folks in Tokyo last week doing a big presentation on it, is a joint venture or an announcement with ADM, another big ethanol producer, a biofuel company, and Osaka Gas. And what Osaka Gas is working to do is replace the traditional natural gas they use for city gas with synthetic natural gas. And so again, in this situation, you have Osaka Gas with the demand, really working hard to help Japan meet their decarbonization goals. You have the supply with ADM being able to provide Green Plains, forgive me, they'll kill me for that, I'm sorry. But, providing the supply, and then ourselves acting as that intermediary position, getting the molecules to market, transporting the energy. And this other announcement on the right side is a really exciting project that's not really focused on kind of exporting molecules, but it's really focused on proving a kind of technology at a massive scale and genuine commercialization. So, 2 years ago, the Escalante coal-fired power plant shut down in New Mexico. In a town called Pruitt, what you had, I think, at its core is 107 folks who lost their jobs and two rural communities that were very devastated by the loss in sales tax, the loss in revenue. And we all know what happens in a lot of these incidents when you close a coal-fired power plant or something. It's not always a one-to-one replacement, right? There's not always something that comes. And so in this situation, those employees moved to do to work at other facilities within Tri-State's network. And what we've done is we've purchased the interest in this project, And what we're attempting to do is convert it to hydrogen power. We've made incredible strides in that development. This would be the first of its kind conversion at this scale of a coal plant to hydrogen. And what it does is it proves a couple of points. The first of which is it brings very large scales of decarbonized dispatchable power to New Mexico. But it also, when you think about kind of zoomed out the skills that you need to operate a coal-fired power plant, you have process technology, you have engineers, you have operators who are excellent in operating heavy equipment. You have those same skills to operate a hydrogen power plant. So it's a little different, but essentially the larger skills are the same. And so as we think about actually a just transition, as we think about the things that are needed within that kind of concept, this is, in our opinion, a perfect example. And I love, putting, President Biden's climate advisor's quote from COP27 about the project up there, which is, this isn't just a concept in a slide deck. This isn't just something that folks are talking about. This is something that, large scale capital is being deployed, large engineering projects are being done to actually make this happen. And in fact, I was listening to a podcast this morning called The Carbon Copy, where the DOE Loan Program Office lead was talking. And one of the things that he talked about was, oil and gas companies, traditional infrastructure companies need to be making more investments into the hydrogen space. And this is a perfect example of one that our company is doing. As I mentioned, we come back to Trailblazer. So this is a project that is really exciting to us. The most important thing is, the Trailblazer pipeline runs from Nebraska to Wyoming. It's a 400-mile natural gas pipeline that we're taking out of service and using to transport CO2 from ADM and other facilities. What the important thing for this audience is what it does is it doesn't impact natural gas service at all. I mean, in fact, because the Trailblazer pipeline runs nearly parallel, about actually 20 miles apart at its furthest, to our Rockies Express pipeline, it allows us to actually move the volumes from Trailblazer over to Rockies Express to maintain that supply demand that we're seeing, while also meeting very sizable climate objectives. One of the big things that I think we can all agree on is we need to more rapidly develop infrastructure to meet these kind of energy transition goals. And what we found at Tallgrass is that in opportunities where you can repurpose legacy fossil fuel assets, you already have pipe in the ground, you already have a power plant built. You just need to adjust some of the technologies to allow it to develop. So what Trailblazer will do is move about 10 million tons of CO2 into Wyoming, where we'll store the CO2 there. We have a great relationship with the state of Wyoming and have been actually very commercially progressing that sequestration project. But kind of the main point I wanted to talk about today is our Rockies Express pipeline and the work that we're doing to make Rockies gas the cleanest in the nation. When we think about the Rockies Express, this is the pipeline that runs from Ohio actually to about Colorado, and then about 2 months ago we purchased another leg, which was called the Ruby Pipeline, which kind of connects from Colorado over to Oregon. So this pipeline allows us to move about 10%. It's about 6 to 10% of the natural gas volumes in the U.S. I mean, it is a massive, massive vehicle for getting molecules to the market. And there's a couple of things that we've been working, very hard on. One of which that we're really excited about is a waste heat to power project. So as you can see on this map, there are a number of compressor stations along the way. And as we all know, as you're kind of either stepping up or stepping down power or moving the molecules, compressing and keeping it going, there's a lot of heat that's generated. And what we're doing is partnering with some enterprising companies to actually take that heat, which would otherwise just be emitted, and use it to generate clean power. A very exciting project where we're thinking about optimization, not novel in its scale, right? Not novel in the idea, but an exciting project for us because of when you think of kind of the cross-continental kind of commitment to decarbonizing, to making sure you're utilizing assets in a way that that helps not only make them economic, but also make them environmentally friendly. But one of the most exciting things about the Rockies Express pipeline is this term that we're trying to coin, which is responsibly transported gas. You know, you have on the upstream kind of side, you have responsibly sourced gas. It's the same concept. What we're doing on Rockies Express is, you know, we've partnered with Project Canary to install 91 of their sensor systems across the asset. And what we've been doing is not only just kind of monitoring through that system, but also working to deliberately quantify beyond what's required in the EPA's documents and be able to essentially, you know, identify any type of leak, identify these types of issues that you would see when you're thinking about transporting natural gas and mitigate them instantaneously. And so what we're able to provide for our customers is a certification that the gas that they are receiving, you know, has been not only sourced sustainably, sourced responsibly, if they're partnering with one of the organizations that's pursuing that, but also that when those companies hand the molecules to us, that we make sure it's done in a way that will help them achieve their ESG commitments. And so, you know, this has been a very whirlwind through what Tallgrass is doing, but the most important thing to say is, you know, we are a company committed to trying to find ways to really advance rapidly the work that needs to be done to engage in the energy transition. We are very proud to be from the Rockies, you know, from the Rocky Mountain region, and very honored to partner with organizations and countries like yourselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. I had mentioned earlier the three legs of the stool, and I probably ought to go expound further on what those three legs are. The leg one is supply. We know we have it. We know we've got 500 trillion cubic feet, 17% of all American natural gas in our basins. We know that we are leaders in decarbonization. Companies such as Tallgrass are leading the way in producing the cleanest molecule in the world for export. That third leg of the stool, and the question we're always asked, and it's really the genesis of Western states and tribal nations, is how are you going to get it there? I'd like to introduce Mr. Paul Ulrich, who is chair of the board of directors for the Wyoming Energy Authority, that's going to shed light and maybe talk a little bit about our plans on financing and infrastructure. And we've got the political will. I think that's demonstrated in this room. But the last key to that puzzle is the financing and infrastructure. Thank you, Paul.
Andrew, thank you. I sure appreciate it. Good morning. My name is Paul Ulrich. I'm the chairman of the Wyoming Energy Authority. I'll explain what that is in a minute. I also happen to be with Jonah Energy. I'm vice president of Jonah Energy. We're a natural gas producer in western Wyoming. And more than pleased to be here, Vice Minister. Thank you very much. Most appreciative of your comments. Chairman Baker, really enjoyed your comments regarding NEPA. I'm in my late 20s, and this is what NEPA's done to me. For that and that alone, I think we need some very serious changes to our permitting process. So the few of us that go bald over dealing with NEPA and federal regulations, maybe the next generation will have a bit of a chance. So, in Wyoming, our North Star is fairly clear. Empowering our nation with a net zero energy mix. In my role as chairman of the Wyoming Energy Authority, my boss is Governor Gordon, Mark Gordon. And he has outlined this fairly succinctly. He's challenged us to join in making Wyoming net negative in CO2 emissions. Small goal. We have to take the lead, and we can't look back, according to our governor. As he quotes, as we actively and thoughtfully collaborate with the industry, environmental groups, entrepreneurs, local communities, and others to produce our way to net negative carbon emissions. Literally. Not just by regulating away our past, and we'll get to that, but by innovating our way to our future. And I think that regulating away our past is key. in Wyoming, we are an energy state. We're the largest coal producer in the country. We've got very healthy oil and gas production. Our reserves are strong, and they're going to continue to be strong. I mean, Wyoming produces 13 times more energy than we consume, and we're the second largest net energy supplier in the country behind Texas. We've been the top coal producing state since 1986, accounting for about 2/5 of all coal mined in the United States. And we've got certainly huge coal reserves. 8th largest crude oil producing state in the nation, accounting for slightly more than 2% of the U.S. total crude oil output, and the 9th largest natural gas producer, accounting for about 3% of the U.S. natural gas market. And I'll tell you this, from an operator standpoint and certainly an energy authority standpoint, what we're producing today is one thing. What our potential is moving forward is something else entirely different. We've got outstanding reserves, and I'm looking at my friend Brian Hassler, who's the chairman of Pure West, a natural gas producer on the western part of the state, just north of our field, the Jonah field. He can attest to that. We've been producing natural gas in western Wyoming for a long time, and that certainly can continue if we can continue to produce it cleaner and cleaner and cleaner and cleaner, and I'll get to that as well. Our renewable resources in Wyoming are strong and growing. Wind power in Wyoming's more than doubled since 2019 alone, accounting for roughly 20% of our state's electrical net generation. The amount of installed wind power generating capacity in the state nearly doubled to just over 3,000 megawatts in a year's period from 2020 to 2021. Our energy evolution, and I'm going to say evolution because the word transition indicates to me that we're moving away from something. And from Wyoming's perspective, we are not. We are a coal producing state. We're a natural gas producing state, we're an oil producing state, and we are proud of it. We're proud that Wyoming contributes a tremendous amount of energy for all of us in this country every single day. And I'm immensely proud of the 30,000 men and women that work in the oil and gas industry 24/7, 365 that make that happen. We are unapologetically supportive of our traditional heritage industries of oil, gas, and certainly coal. But it requires continued investment in our foundational energy sources with a focus on deep emission reductions through differentiated natural gas, CCUS, and other decarbonizing efforts. And Tallgrass mentioned that, and I think that's critical. In Wyoming, we've poured that foundation for advanced nuclear tech. We talk about that all the above approach, and that's awfully important to me. Is that all the time you're giving me, Andrew? With that, thank you. No, I'll try to talk through that. As I mentioned, we poured the foundation for advanced nuclear tech in Wyoming and are actively engaged in developing a hydrogen economy. Back to that all of the above approach in Wyoming, and it's awfully critical for us. Wyoming's large energy producing sector and small population help make us the second most energy intensive state economy in the country, but it also requires us to invest, innovate, and lead the nation with an all of the above net zero energy mix, and that's real critical. The Wyoming Energy Authority is an advocate and champion of these efforts. Wyoming Energy powers our country, and we foster that environment in which innovators, research, developers, and stakeholders, including Western states and tribal nations, and others, gather, support, and act as one cohesive voice. And I think that's critical. Chairman Baker, that's where I really appreciated your remarks. I couldn't agree more. If we're not speaking with one voice on this issue, we will get drowned out. We all know that. And it's critical that we keep working together. Wyoming had an incredible foresight in the creation and the abilities of the Wyoming Energy Authority. And the reason Andrew wanted me to talk today is talk about the tools that energy authority can bring to the table. The creation was driven by the need to diversify and expand Wyoming's economy through improvements in the state's electrical and certainly energy transmission infrastructure. We were tasked with facilitating Wyoming's production, development, and transmission of energy and all associated natural resources, not a small task. Here's what's important, and I think important for today's discussion. Our tools include authority to finance, construct, develop, acquire, maintain, and operate energy transmission facilities, advanced technology facilities for natural resources associated with energy, carbon dioxide capture and transportation infrastructure, distribution facilities, and related supporting infrastructure. I know that's a mouthful, but what it means is Wyoming is well positioned to work with our state partners, our tribal partners, our international partners, other stakeholders, certainly federal agencies, for a myriad of large-scale infrastructure and financing projects. So if we need pipe in the ground, Wyoming can help. If we need to form the framework of being able to finance that pipe or other infrastructure, Wyoming can help. We can even own it. I'd rather we didn't in some cases. I'd rather that very much be a partnership, but we have that ability. We've got the framework to make concepts that we've heard about today a reality. We can also assist with obtaining financing and funding for energy projects through the use or combination of our bonding authority, our grants, loans, and private and institutional investors. We also have the ability to operate a pipeline. I don't want to compete with Tallgrass or other transportation and distribution systems within or outside the state of Wyoming. And that was a key point of the legislation that Wyoming created, outside of Wyoming, which allows us to get very serious about projects such as this. All this backed up with the ability to issue and have outstanding bonds to the finance within, or once again, without the state of Wyoming in an amount not to exceed $3 billion. So we've got the means, we've got the will in Wyoming, we have the resources, and based on what I've heard today in our partnership with Western states, we have the right partners in the room. Perhaps our most important charge today is the mission to engage with international and domestic stakeholders on potential market opportunities, those energy projects, technology development that's going to increase the value, very selfishly, of Wyoming energy and our associated natural resources. In particular, clean Wyoming natural gas. Pretty important for us as a state. Natural gas and oil and coal are the foundation of our economy. It is truly the reason we have such a cherished quality of life in Wyoming. And our collective ability to strengthen the domestic natural gas supply responsibly is going to lead to long-term economic sustainability of the Rockies and our sovereign tribal nations, which is pretty important for us in Wyoming as well. I've got family that are enrolled Arapaho, and from our perspective, always, Mr. Chairman, working together to advance our economy on what's best for every single one of us is absolutely critical. We can't do it alone. We've proven that throughout the years. We've also proven that multi-state relationships with our tribal partners it can actually move the needle. Globally, I think we've got a tremendous opportunity to make a real difference in our Asian and European allies' decarbonization efforts. The quality of natural gas coming out of Wyoming and our partner states is demonstrably cleaner. We can prove that today. And as part of that, I'm immensely proud to be part of a team at Jonah Energy that shares Wyoming's vision of providing the nation's cleanest natural gas. Wearing that hat just for a sec, we're an oil and gas exploration and development company operating in the Jonah and Anticline fields with our neighbors Pure West to the north. Jonah was the first U.S.-based company to sign on to the United Nations Environment Programme's Oil and Gas Methane Partnership 2.0, and have since been followed by a number of leading independents in Wyoming and across the nation. And those signatories, and why this is important, represent 30% of the world's natural gas chain. And their mission is to provide credibility, and transparency to the natural gas supply chain. So if we're talking to our friends in Japan, they can be assured that they're getting the cleanest molecule of natural gas that can be produced. And it's backed up by the International Methane Emissions Observatory as a third-party auditor. Why we have taken these steps matters. We believe we're all part of the solution. A demonstrably cleaner source of natural gas ensures reliability and carbon reduction for both domestic and global use. I'm not going to repeat it, but certainly we know that consumption and production is expected to grow and grow significantly. The world needs energy. In Wyoming, in the West, can provide cleaner energy than we're sourcing today. And every day that we're producing, we're getting cleaner and cleaner. Fun fact, Jonah Energy alone produces about 623 trillion equivalent BTUs a day. That's enough to power about 3 million Teslas, about 15.5 billion of these a day, and Switzerland. So imagine if little old Jonah Energy in Western Wyoming can do that, what we can do with our partners if we start increasing production. I was going to cover some numbers from EIA, but that was already done, so I'm not going to go there. So, how do we get there? I think that's really the big question I've got. For us and our future generations, our collective goals for a healthier world, and certainly to meet climate goals at a local, a state, certainly a national and global level. We need to acknowledge that all energy sources have impact, and I think that's key, in the bias against hydrocarbons. I want to give you a couple examples. In Wyoming, we've got a goofy little bird. It's about this tall, the sage grouse, that has been imperiled for, you know what I'm talking about, Mr. Chairman, for a number of years. It's been petitioned for listing a few times through ESA, and it warrants protection. And Governor Friedenthal in 2008, Wyoming's governor, had the foresight to tackle that issue head on prior to federal intervention, stood up a team to deal with it, and we went through, all of the science, all of the partnerships, and came down with a very stringent set of regulations, state-born, that were the foundation for the current federal rules. And we did a great job. It was one of the largest conservation projects in the West in decades. And it's done a very effective job of protecting the sage grouse. Part of that protection was 24% of the state was basically set aside as priority habitat. With the right technology, there are some energy sources that are allowed to operate within that 24% of Wyoming state. Oil and gas, if done right, one location per section. I'll give you one guess what energy sources had greater impact on sage grouse in that habitat than oil and gas. Anybody have a guess? Wind. There we go. It was determined based on a number of scientific studies that oil and gas was compatible with limited impact if done right, and wind was not. I'm not up here to bash wind. What I am going to tell you is, if done right, hydrocarbons can and should, compete with, quote, renewables if we account for all of the impacts that we're dealing with. If we can tackle emissions, which we're doing, and you've heard that today, then you start looking at wildlife impacts, surface impacts, habitat fragmentation impacts, and then we can have an honest dialogue about all of our energy resources and the fact that they all have impact. Natural gas has always been a clean energy product, but not always produced and delivered responsibly. And what you've heard today and what you're going to continue here is we can. And to us, responsibly produced gas means having a credible, verifiable, and transparent program. Supply matters, and Wyoming's led the nation in environmental protections while balancing that need to provide clean, sustainable energy development. And certainly at Jonah Energy and others, we've led the charge on producing that cleanest molecule. I'm going to jump right to the closing. Wyoming has significantly lower methane emission intensity from production than any other producing area by basin, based on a 21 study by Burns and Gruber out of Georgia Tech. Quote from the study, it really does make a difference where your natural gas is coming from and what that production lead grade is from your basin. And I can tell you the Rockies gas, both in Wyoming and beyond, is becoming cleaner and cleaner. So in closing, where do we go from here? I think first and foremost, we need to work to create a regulatory and economic pathway to certified natural gas, both domestic and for export. Collaboration is key, thus the reason for Western states measurement commitments like the Oil and Gas Methane Project 2.0. These collaborations are going to lead to a more consistent, credible, and transparent emission reduction effort across the supply chain. Big one, unlock North America's Pacific coast as an export route to Asia for natural gas produced in the American West. We look at the upper Green River Basin where I operate down to the Four Corners area, and that spine and that corridor, which all of are interested in, and we have the ability to strengthen our production, increase our production, and export via LNG, in particular to our friends in Japan. We've got something that's going to give us long-term economic stability while we continue to reduce our carbon footprint. That market for differentiated low-emission natural gas is going to support those global climate goals. I mentioned this earlier, but certainly unlock Rockies production. It's critical that we streamline development of natural gas in the West. It has to be a priority. Federal land production through regulatory and voluntary measures, some of the demonstrably cleanest natural gas in the country, and policy should embrace and incentivize operators who demonstrate that deep commitment. And finally, initiate meaningful discussions and partnerships with states and leverage our infrastructure and financial tools that Wyoming can bring to the table. We're here to partner. I'll make that very, very clear. We've got the financial tools. We've got the commitment on the ground. We've got the resources, and if we can build these partnerships, we can make visions such as an LNG terminal fed by upper green gas to peons to Four Corners a reality if we work together. We have the ability to facilitate those large-scale projects that clearly benefit our economy in Wyoming, and we can do this while preserving the jobs, the tax revenue, and the quality of life that the energy industry in the West provides all of us. So we see it as our job in Wyoming, and certainly as Jonah Energy, to deliver energy as responsibly as possible to meet that expectation of a cleaner energy future. Natural gas is part of the solution, and I encourage all of us to embrace it. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. I'd like to note that this was a large effort to produce this, but also our staff and our members, tribal members, went to, over the past couple of days, I think we had about 25 meetings on the Hill with relevant committees, foreign affairs. Obviously, we view this as a foreign policy as well as an energy and energy security effort. And I just want to thank staff for helping pull all this together, our members, our tribal members, our Japanese guests for coming to really kind of culminate this, have this discussion on collaboration and to lay out a path forward. I'm going to turn it over to our board chair, Jason Sandell, appointed by Governor Lujan Grisham of New Mexico to serve on Weston for final remarks. But again, thanks everybody for coming, and look forward to working with you on these great issues in the weeks and months ahead. Thank you.
Alrighty, I'm gonna step away from that mic. It's a little hot. Thank you all very much for your attendance this morning. Appreciate all of the participation. I am a drilling contractor who lives in northwestern New Mexico. And, the fact of the matter is after the global economic crisis of 2008, our community was getting ready to dry up and blow away. And our community, as so many others across the Rocky Mountains, was entirely dependent upon natural gas development and consumption. And with prices collapsing, what happened was people just left. They no longer had jobs. They had to go somewhere else in order to put food on their table. And so for me, when we're talking about energy development, it really is about the men and women who dedicate their lives to developing resources so that we can turn on our lights and drive our cars. And ultimately, their hard work results in them being able to take care of their family. So I am incredibly honored to be appointed to Western States and Tribal Nations to represent the state of New Mexico and to be appointed by our governor. And then for Western States and Tribal Nations to then give me the honor of being their chairman. For me, as I said, the importance of Western States and Tribal Nations is about rural and tribal economic development. It's really how it became such an important organization to me. As I said, our community was drying up. People had left. There were no other opportunities that were afforded to us. The importance of Western States and Tribal Nations in giving a voice for tribal self-determination about energy development on their sovereign land is a critical mission that we have as an organization, ultimately to enhance the natural gas market for the Rocky Mountain states. Those are lofty goals: economic development, self-determination, a voice in energy development. And then a year ago, in my lifetime, one of the most unbelievably terrible events with Russia invading Ukraine, now our mission is that much more important. So our organization has evolved from rural and tribal economic development to really helping solve national and international energy security issues. So thank you, Vice Minister, and the Japanese delegation. Thank you all for your time. Thank you for coming to Grand Junction and speaking with us at that event and elevating our mission to this level of importance. Thank you to the Hickory Apache Nation, to the Ute Indians, and the Southern Ute. You all have beat doors with us for the past several days to share this message about the importance not only of sovereignty, but the development of energy resources. Thank you also to Senator Barrasso and to Senators Lujan. And for me, in closing, what I heard today was the Department of State saying that oil and gas is going to be needed for years. I heard Japan say that if the United States is rejecting fossil fuels, especially natural gas, that's only going to result in Asian nations getting fuels from Russia, Iran, and China. And this is the true inconvenient truth. Senator Barrasso said that the time is now to develop United States energy resources, which includes a national energy policy focused on self-sufficiency and an international policy focused on helping our friends and allies. Then Senator Lujan came and said that he approaches issues where we're all a family. I take this to mean that we can cuss and discuss issues. You can be on different sides of that particular issue. Yet we come together at the end of the day for what is the best for all of us. And all of us today is a pretty wide, big group. And I think it's pretty neat. You know, it's pretty remarkable to me for Senator Lujan to talk about family. He and I met each other in the New Mexico state capitol as little bitty kids when our parents, his dad and my dad, were both legislators running around, and we were running around the capitol. And here he is today, a United States Senator, talking about the importance of family. Here I am, the son of a cowboy from northwestern New Mexico, and him, the son of a union worker from Espanola, New Mexico, with very divergent viewpoints in political discussions, but coming together as family to promote economic development, tribal self-determination, and solutions for energy policy across the globe. So today, our family is discussing the development and export of clean and responsibly produced energy resources to ensure energy security for the next century. With 10% of all U.S. energy resources being located on tribal lands, tribal sovereignty must begin the conversation. Next, infrastructure modernization is of critical path for exports. And we need the certainty in the permitting process for this modernization. Finally, since we have the resources and there is support for helping our brothers and sisters in Asia, we must seek to find common understanding through formal documents about export of U.S. natural gas to Asian nations so that we can build a new global energy economy. We welcome you all. We welcome staff of Congress. We welcome voices from all over the United States and across the globe to sit at our table with us, cuss and discuss, and come together as family at the end of the day to develop solutions on behalf of not only the Rocky Mountains, not only the Western United States, but truly for the globe. And so thank you all very much for attending today and listening to our message. And we encourage your participation and appreciate you very, very much. Thank you all very much.
Speaking of family, thank you, Browning kids, for sticking it out. I hope you learned something. Thanks so much.